ちは。私は帝国歌劇団花組の新宮寺さくらです。
マッチが上がりますわ。
どんな世界であっても私は正義の剣を振るいます。
これが私の力です。
Hey everyone, this is Nitro. In this video, I want to talk about the 4 new heroes that will be coming up in October 3rd to October 16th, which is the collaboration banner number 3, which is Sakura Wars. So, for Sakura Wars, this is there's going to be 3 heroes from Sakura Wars, which will be introduced to Langrisser. And in addition to these 3, which are Shinguji Sakura, Kanzaki Sumire, and Iris Chateaubriand, there is also going to be a 4th character, Angelica, who will finally join the Langrisser party as an SR character. So I'll talk about these 4 heroes in this preview video. So, first, let's talk about the one who is arguably the most useful, Iris Chateaubriand. She is incredibly useful because she'll be just like Chloe. You're going to get a lot of shards of her, so that you'll have a high level Iris to use for PvP and PvE. So, with that said, let's begin by talking about her talent, which is spiritual power. And what spiritual power does is when Iris' turn ends, units within 2 spaces of her gain buff, Dreamy Kiss, and it restores a certain amount of hit points at the end of a turn. And this buff lasts 2 turns, right? At 2 stars, it will be 1 times her intelligence. At 3 stars, it becomes 1.5 times her int. At 4 stars, it's 2 times her intelligence. At 5 stars, it's 2.5 times, and then at 6 stars, it's 3 times. So, the higher star level Iris you have, the more she'll heal on these allies with that buff. Iris' classes are basically a holy class as well as a mage class. And she has 2 unique skills. These 2 unique skills are a skill called Teddy Bear and a skill called Iris Outbreak. Okay. And they're both incredibly useful. Okay. The Teddy Bear skill, what it does is it's an active skill which teleports herself. Okay. It has a 2 costs with a 3-turn cooldown, just like anyone else's teleport. But the unique part of her self-teleport is that at the end of her turn, she will heal all ally units within 2 spaces of her 2 times her intelligence. And this effect also lasts 2 turns. So this Teddy Bear skill also combos with the spiritual power skill, so it's of her talent. So it's quite useful. Here's just a demonstration of the Teddy Bear skill in use. So, in addition to the Teddy Bear skill, her other unique skill, Iris Outbreak, rather than teleporting herself, it allows her to teleport an ally to a space within a certain range. Now, normal teleports have a 7 range, and Iris Outbreak has a 5 space teleport range, so it's a reduced range teleport. However, the advantage of this teleport skill is that it applies buffs on the ally you've teleported. First, the ally will be able to ignore terrain movement penalties. So just like Ulte Muller's buff, it applies a buff allowing a character to ignore terrain penalties. And in addition to that, it's like an enhanced miracle effect. It increases the character's damage dealt by 20% and reduces the damage taken of the character by 20%. Recall that miracle only increases by 15% of each. So this buff does last 2 turns as well. So it's just incredibly useful in increasing your character's damage, decreasing the damage that they take, and also teleporting them to safety. So it's just a great skill overall. And here's a sample of it in use. Iris Outbreak does have a few vulnerabilities though. First, Iris Outbreak has a 5-turn cooldown, so it's an extremely long cooldown. You'll only be able to use it once and maybe twice in a PvP battle. Other than that though, the fact that it allows characters to ignore terrain, increase their damage, and reduce the damage taken is amazing for a skill. So Iris Outbreak is a 2-point skill, which means Iris can then bring just a 1-point skill. And usually people just bring the regular heal skill for her 3rd and final skill, because that way she makes an incredible healer. So that is Iris in a nutshell. Remember, Iris is an SR character, and because you get her free, and presumably you get a lot of shards of her, so you get her at 5 stars, she's just a great character to bring whether it's PvP or PvE. Alright, so with Iris covered, let's move on to talk about the 2 SSR characters that will appear in the upcoming banner, which are Shinguji Sakura and Kanzaki Sumire. I should say, both SSRs actually have great utility. The problem is, both SSRs pretty much need to be 5 or 6 stars to be usable. So, because they need to be 5 or 6 stars, they're very hard to level up, because there's a lot of other characters that you need to level up. If you can bring them leveled up to 5 or 6 stars, they're great. But because most people can't afford to level them up, I consider both of them basically whale toys. As a result, I probably will not be drawing on this banner. I say that on a lot of banners, I probably end up drawing on them anyways, but if I'm playing smart, I really should not draw on this banner. So, with that said, let's begin by covering Sakura Shinguji. So, her talent is absolutely amazing. Her talent is Iaido Flash, and the effect of it is that after eliminating an enemy, all stats other than hit points increases by a certain percentage. And this percentage increase can be stacked up to 4 times. In addition, it cannot be dispelled. And finally, when entering combat, if Sakura's skill is higher than the opponent's, her units will attack first. So, the percentage increases of stats is the following. At 3 stars, it's 5%. At 4 stars, it's 6%. At 5 stars, it's 8%. And at 6 stars, it's 10%. So, if she's at 5 stars with 4 stacks, she can get a 32% stat increase. And if she's at 6 stars with 4 stacks, you're looking at a 40% stat increase, which is pure insanity. Because of her second effect, which is where if her unit skill is higher than the opponent, she will attack first. What that means is she starts a trend that makes the skill stat more important for characters than it used to be. Right? Other characters where the skill stat becomes more and more important is Omega, and Grenier when he gets his second class. So, with that covered, let's talk about Sakura's classes. And she has two classes, Cavalry and Infantry. Okay. Generally speaking, people use her as an infantry because the infantry class has 100 more skill than the cavalry class. It has 247 base skill as opposed to 142. In addition to that, her cavalry class has 4 movement while her infantry class just has 3. So, here's an example of Sakura's talent in action. Now, in this example, she does die to the enemy attack. However, you get to see that Sakura does her full attack into the enemy first, before the enemy is able to counterattack. Granted, the enemy's counterattack was actually able to one-shot Sakura entirely, but that's because the enemy, in this case Luna, is ridiculously powerful. But the key point to note in this example is that the enemy Holy Pegasus didn't get to do any damage whatsoever to Sakura. If this Sakura had a bit more attack, theoretically she could have just one-shotted the enemy Luna and possibly not taken any damage whatsoever. Alright, next, let's talk about Sakura's skills. And in terms of skills, she mostly has either single attack skills, of course, or a few AoE skills. Her single attack skills are pretty common. She has access to Smash, and she has access to the Roar skill, so 1.3 times or 1.4 times damage to the enemy. Right? Smash, of course, can disable the enemy tank's guard skill, which can be useful. So, other than Smash and Roar, she has her unique AoE attack skills. And the ones that she has one is called Oka Hoshin, which is a line attack dealing 0.3 times damage. The line attack has 5 range and a cooldown of 3. It does apply a bleeding effect on the enemy, where at the end of the enemy's next turn, they take fixed damage equal to 2 times the attacker's attack value. And this effect actually lasts 2 turns. So it's a 5 range line attack can always be useful. But other than Oka Hoshin, she also has ultimate skill, Hyaka Hyorin. And what this one does is it attacks all enemies within 3 tiles of her, dealing 0.3 times damage. It also inflicts skill minus 30%, damage taken plus 30%, and a heal reversal effect, where all healing effects deal damage equal to 30% of the healing effect, and it lasts 2 turns. So it's just an amazing AoE skill. And here's just an example of her ultimate being used in combat. So, it can be tough to decide which skill to bring on Sakura, whether you bring her 2 AoE attacks or you bring her Smash or Roar skill so she can one-shot targets to become more powerful. So what skills you bring on Sakura is kind of up to you. The final thing to note though, on Sakura, other than her skills, which she has 4 useful skills, 2 single target strikes and 2 AoEs, is the soldiers that Sakura has access to. So, the soldiers are what you see on the screen right now. She has Zealots, Heavy Infantry, Exorcists, Heavy Cavalry, Heaven's Guard, Dark Guards, and Bone Dinos. So, those 7 are her soldiers. Very commonly, you see her use Zealots because the Zealots get additional stats per buff that's applied on her. So that's why a lot of people use Zealots more than any other soldier. But the other soldiers do definitely have uses too. which one you bring. I guess it depends on which ones you have leveled, so it's kind of up to you. Alright, so with her soldiers covered and her skills talked about, I guess I'll just do the concluding comments about her. So, first of all, she's usually used in her infantry class because the infantry class has 247 skill. Occasionally, you might change her to her cavalry class due to the difference in movement. The cavalry class has 4 movement, her infantry class has 3. Next, she is the trend where skill becomes more and more important. So you're going to want high skill on her. On the accessory, you're going to want the plus 15% skill if at all possible. Third, I talked about her 4 useful 2-point skills, but her 1-point skill is generally going to be the deathmatch skill, because the deathmatch skill increases attack and skill by 12%, while reducing defense and magic defense by 7%. But it's a very good trade because you're getting 12% more skill, which definitely allows you to attack first. And last but not least is the fact that she's just a great PvP and PvE character due to the amount of damage she can do and her ability to attack first. But the vulnerability of her is that she needs to be at a high star level to be usable. So whether you can get her to a high star level will determine whether you use Sakura or not. Alright, so with Sakura covered, let's now talk about the other SSR, Sumire Kanzaki. Sumire Kanzaki, unlike Sakura, is kind of an odd character. She has a very limited kind of tanking, a very unique playstyle, and because of that, she's more geared towards PvP. She does have use as well in one of the Ancient Call battles due to her unique skills, but overall, I think of her as a very odd and hard to use character in general. Just like Sakura, you need her at a high star level for her to be used, because she very much operates as like a tank class character, which means she needs to be at 5 or 6 stars, because tank class characters need to be able to tank hits, otherwise it's kind of pointless. So, Sakura's Kanzaki's factions are Empire, Princess, and Time. Her talent is that when she makes a regular attack, the hero's range is increased by 1. And for every soldier loss, her attack and skill increase by a certain percentage. At 3 stars it's 1%, at 4 stars it's 2%, at 5 stars it's 3%, and at 6 stars it's a 4% increase. Remember, each hero has 10 soldiers, so if all her soldiers are dead, she's getting a 40% attack and skill increase, which is amazing. Her classes, just rather similar to Sakura, she has a cavalry class, and her other class is Lancer. The cavalry class has 4 movement, the Lancer class has 3, of course. Generally speaking, because she's a tank, you're probably going to use her in her Lancer class. In terms of skills, she has primarily 2 unique skills. The first unique skill on Kanzaki is a skill called Butterfly Dance. And the Butterfly Dance attacks enemies within 1 ring of her, dealing 0.3 times damage and inflicts bleeding, where at the end of the unit's next turn, they receive fixed damage equal to 2 times the attacker's attack, and it lasts 2 turns. So it's rather similar to Sakura's skill, but Sakura's skill is a line attack, whereas Kanzaki's skill is a ring attack, and it's only just 1 ring around her. So it can be... in very many ways, you can think of Butterfly Dance as being relatively similar to, let's say, Sword Dance, right, on Bernhard. other than Butterfly Dance, which is overall I'd say fairly typical, her other unique skill is Phoenix Dance. And the way Phoenix Dance works is she attacks enemies within 2 rings of her, dealing 0.35 times damage to them. In addition to that, she gains the special effect Nirvana, where unit will not die when suffering fatal damage once, and will heal 10% hit points. This can only occur during the duration of this skill, and it lasts 2 turns. And finally, the skill also grants her the Lance Phalanx effect, where she can guard at 2 range and do some barb damage to enemies who attack. The problem with Phoenix Dance is that it has a cooldown of 5 turns. So given that Lance Phalanx only lasts 2 turns, and the skill has a cooldown of 5, she has ultimately very, very limited ability to guard allies. So nonetheless, the fact that she has a revive ability that can be refreshed is amazing, which makes her very, very usable for PvP and also very usable in PvE, such as in Ancient's Call. So here's an example of Phoenix Dance in action. So, other than her unique skills, her other skills that she has is she does have access to Strike, which allows her to move an additional 3 tiles for 2 costs, and she does have Armor Pierce, which allows her to do 1.5 times damage to the enemy and reduce the enemy's defense by 30%. So she could be used as a Strike plus Armor Pierce single target attacker, in addition to being a tank class type character. With Phoenix Dance and probably Butterfly Dance, and then her last skill would likely be the regular counterattack skill. What counterattack does is, first, it allows her to take physical damage for adjacent allies, and second, when she's attacked, it increases her attack by 12%, and this is for 1 point. So basically, Kanzaki as a tank is kind of unique because she usually just only has 1 guard range by a counterattack. And then when she can use Phoenix Dance, she'll have barbs via Lance Phalanx and a 2 guard range, but you gotta keep in mind that Phoenix Dance, while it allows her to revive if she dies, it also has a 5-turn cooldown. So it's very hard for her to have 2 guard range in general. Alright, so that pretty much covers Kanzaki as a character. In terms of her soldiers, she has Guardian Cavalry, Stone Colossus, Phalanx, High Elf, Amazon Champions, Templar Knights, and Sky Archers. Alright, so overall, in conclusion, Sumire is usually used as a tank, and she has a very unique playstyle compared to most tanks, right? Because she has very limited guard range. In addition to that, because she powers up when her soldiers die, she can actually choose to bring 2 range soldiers, right? Because of her talent. So the way Kanzaki would work is, due to her having +1 range, she would bring 2 range soldiers such as the Sky Archers or High Elves, attack at 2 range. When she gets melee attacked or attacked in general, her soldiers die, she takes the hit, maybe revives, and in the next turn, she has, let's say, plus 40% attack and skill to do another high damage attack. So that more or less sums up Sumire's combat style. Alright, so last but not least is the character that is not part of Sakura Wars, which is Angelica. And Angelica finally joins the Langrisser party as an SR character. Her factions are Glory, as in Legion of Glory, and the Time and Space faction. Overall, she is very much a typical mage. She's a very generic mage overall. I was trying to find some clips of people using her, and I was not able to find any. So it is what it is. The things about her is that, first, she is a time and space faction buffer for people who don't have Joshua leveled up. And the other part of her is she has a pretty gimmicky talent and summon skill. Okay. In terms of her talent, it's called Thorough Analysis, where before entering combat, the unit soldiers will convert into the same type as the enemy soldiers, and at the end of her turn, restore a certain percentage of her soldiers' hit points. At 2 stars it's 50%, at 3 stars it's 60%, at 4 stars it's 70%, at 5 stars it's 80%, and at 6 stars it's 100% health restoration on the soldiers. So with that said, this does assume that she can survive the enemy attack to restore the hit points. Remember, she is primarily a mage class character, so mages are pretty easy to one-shot, so you need to keep that in mind. In terms of the soldiers she has access to, from the training ground she gets the Mist Dancer and Lava Titans. And other than that, she currently has access to Wizards and Heavy Centurions. So she can bring, I guess, Lancers, or Mages, or Mist Dancers as her soldiers. Other than that, let's talk about the skills that she has access to. And Angelica actually has quite a few line attack skills. So she has Electric Missile and Ice Missile, both of which are line attacks with 6 range. They attack in a line, doing 0.33 times damage with 6 range. One is effective against cavalry and reduces enemy defense by 20%. The other is effective against lancers and reduces movement by 1. Other than those 2 line attacks, she has access to Wind Blades, Mass Attack, and a skill called I Got This. This skill is an active skill, and it defeats all troops of a selected target, and then summons an Angelina machine equal to the soldier's current stats. So, this skill targets allies, not enemies, okay? So it kills off an ally's soldiers to summon, I guess, a unit that has those soldiers' stats. Is it useful? Truly, it's very hard to say. It's more a gimmick, like I said, it's much more of a gimmick and amusing kind of thing than anything else. So, yeah, I guess that pretty much concludes Angelina. Like I said, she is very much a fairly generic mage with an interesting kind of summon skill and a faction buff for time and space. Okay, so that concludes my video on the 4 new characters. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this information useful, because that banner is coming up, or should be coming up, on October 3rd, and that is 3 weeks away. So, on that note, Nitro